If you don't stay down and you never quit, come on over here and sit on the far end of the bench.
Bench warmers, welcome. Episode 173, and things do look a little bit different. I said that Niko was not going to be available for this week. He and I have been talking about it. We didn't mention it to you all because it's his business, but he did get his tonsils taken out, and it's probably best that he rests his voice now. He should save his voice for eating those ice cream cones, popsicle sticks, like everything that's soft, cool, keeps everything nice and relaxed. So he's doing that. I did reach out to Variety Sports. That's the best thing about being on this network. Be sure to follow at Variety_Sports_. And it makes sense because the title, the voice of Variety Sports. Jordan, you're on like every show. And when anybody ever needs a co-host, you're like first one to jump in. Half of Ohio sports talk, a third of Talking the Gridiron. You've made an appearance on the double-double. Have you made an appearance on seventh inning stretch and completed the trifecta or whatever we want to call this here?
I've been on the T&B. I will be on the double-double tomorrow night at 9 p.m. Eastern time. So I'll definitely complete the stretch moving forward. The seventh inning, I haven't made an appearance on that yet, but spring training is coming to an end, and I'm sure you'll see me. We got a lot of Reds players are going to be making some headlines moving forward. So.
Yeah, this is good why you came on the show. If you followed Talking the Gridiron, which you could watch during the seasons, both on Variety Sports and on this channel, Jordan is in the Cincinnati area. He's a local. It makes sense that he likes the Bengals as much as he does. It doesn't make sense whenever I tell anybody, it's like the first, wow, it's a long story, but it's going to be a local perspective. So if you've been listening to me talk about it, this is like what I gather. I try and follow. And I guess I'll get your reactions to the names. I listened to the Bengals booth with Lapham and Dan Horde because I get the radio replays and everything like that. It's cool to listen to the local radio guys. I listened to Joe Goodberry. I've heard his different forms of his media. He likes to talk a lot. Other than that, that's like the most amount of information I'm able to gather. The Bengals don't make it this far out west unless you really go searching. So I'm glad that you're going to be here and talk about kind of the local perspective on our show. And
I appreciate being here. It's always a pleasure. It's been a little bit too long. I miss our talks on the gridiron, but I'm happy to be sharing some time with you on your show here on Far End of the Bench. You guys got to check them out if you haven't. They're on Variety Sports Network. They're on YouTube. They do great jobs. They cover almost all sports. They're big hockey people. A lot of stuff out west.
Yeah. Hockey's coming up later on in the show. I'm letting you go, and then I'm going to go off on hockey because funny enough, you said you watch a lot of the Nuggets too. So we're going to be able to talk Bengals free agency. I did a mock draft for the Bengals. You have a mock draft. Like we're going to talk a little bit about that stuff. And then you're also going to chime in on the Nuggets, which it's good because Niko, I love Niko, and he's obviously the basketball expert. But you could tell Niko Jokic walked on water, and he wouldn't be like he'd be in for it. So that's going to be a fun conversation too, and we're going to bring up Michael Porter Jr. because he's an X factor, and he needs to be an X factor. But that's going to be coming up later on in the show. So if you're tuning in live, we got plenty of stuff coming up. It's not just going to be all Bengals talk, but since that's where we're going to start, you see the hat that Jordan's wearing. I'm wearing pretty much the same thing. Were you born and raised in the Cincinnati area, I'm assuming?
I was just on the outskirts of Cincinnati over in Dayton, which is about 20 minutes north. But yeah, I've been born and raised in Cincinnati sports all my life. The Big Red Machine, the Bengals. We have a lot of culture here. Ohio's huge in football. That team up north, we don't talk about the Browns much, but
well. Yeah,
or Michigan for that matter. I can't believe I said that on air, but definitely a big Cincinnati guy. It's something my family definitely follows. My dad, his dad, so we got a lot of time invested in this franchises.
So we would have similar story. I'm assuming because you probably watched football games with your dad when you were super young. I always tell people the story how I got into the Bengals was. My dad had a random game on, and it happened to be one of like the 4 Bengals games that we got at the time because it was like first part of that Carson Palmer, Rudy Johnson era where they were kind of good, kind of getting on the verge of coming back after that terrible end to the 90s. And I was like, the Tiger Stripes. I love the color scheme, the Tiger Stripes. And then I did end up liking Carson Palmer, Rudy Johnson. Ocho Stinko came in there for a little bit. It was a fun time to be a Bengals fan, but then I was haunted by the ghost of Marvin Lewis, and he did not go away. I finally got into like high school, and you know how you that's where you start to develop your sports opinion, is walking through high school hallways. And it was 2015, and I'm like, oh, guys, of course we're going to beat the Steelers. This is the best way for things to happen. I have not seen them win a playoff game. We're going to beat the Steelers. And if you don't remember, that was the Vontaz Burfict shoulder to Antonio Brown's head, which basically changed the trajectory of 2 careers all at once. That's the majority of my experience as a Bengals fan. I assume with you having a little bit more time put into it, you had a similar story. What was your first, who was your first guy on the Bengals? What era are we looking at here?
Not too far from there. It definitely Peter Warwick era. Definitely the Corey Dillon. Those 2 guys were hugely on the team when I started to become more of a full-time fan, with knowing names, numbers, who's doing what. So it was right at the beginning of Marvin Lewis's era. Both those guys were there before he got there, but definitely Corey Dillon pulled my attention in. Everybody had a Corey Dillon jersey walking middle school, grade school. Yeah. You go out with your family to the bar. Your dad's got the Corey Dillon, you got the mini Corey Dillon. So yeah, Corey Dillon started my fascination with Bengals football. A shame how that ended. I'm glad he got one. I'm glad he got one in New England. He definitely, another conversation for another day. His name definitely belongs in a circle. Mm-hmm. Statistically, he did a lot for the organization, that he was just on a bad team, and to ask him to stick around for a rebuild, I wasn't mad at him. That I was mad at the time, but looking at the business side, which is the NFL, the not for long league, you look at that, and he had to make a career decision. His career decision was to go with Tom Brady and win some championships late in his career. He gave a lot to Cincinnati. So in that aspect, I'll never be a bitter fan about it.
I was going to say that was kind of the first. It was a trend for a second with the Bengals stars at some point having this falling out. And that's a lot of what you hear about the Bengals, especially outside of Cincinnati, is just Mike Brown and மற்றும் and how cheap everything was. I've heard a couple of times Hushmanzada talking about stories, sharing jock straps, bringing in your own Gatorade to the facility. Oh, yeah. And I'm pretty sure, if I'm not mistaken, in the most recent PA poll, he still may deduct meals that you have at the facility from your weekly check. You might not notice it because it's like $50 out of a however many $1,000 paycheck, but he's not letting anything go for free. If you play for the Bengals, it's been a rough go of it, and that's why people historically have not wanted to play for them. I grew up in Denver, and Alfred Williams was a big Denver sports radio guy after he played with the Bengals initially and then moved over to the Broncos and won the Super Bowls. But he was very adamant. It wasn't a good facility. It was tough to go to work, especially when the team wasn't great back in the 90s. So what did you see kind of change from that very dark era where you have back-to-back number 1 overall picks into, obviously now we can talk about the good times with Joe Burrow and the recent era of Zach Taylor and the success that we've been seeing. But where have you seen the biggest change about this organization?
The biggest change, as much as I knock on Marvin Lewis, that's where the change started. He got the reins to a franchise that was in complete disarray, a franchise that wasn't respected by anybody in the division, not a lot of players in NFL. Agents were keeping the players out. People that got drafted there didn't really want to be there. It was considered a cheap franchise, just like the stories come out. But Marvin Lewis did change that culture. He did bring in a different vibe. A lot of the stuff, he pulled Mike Brown's ear and got a lot of stuff done. He got the machines in the facility. He got the Gatorades. He got the sports equipment that they desperately needed. When we brought in Carson Palmer with the number 1 pick from USC, and it kind of built from there. Then when we got Chad Johnson and company, John Kitna changed the franchise around by teaching Carson Palmer everything he knew during their first 8-8 season when we drafted him.
Yep.
And that's when he saw that culture shift. That's when it became exciting. Marvin Lewis did make Bengals football exciting. He couldn't win when it mattered the most. Some of it was injuries. You talk about the 2013 game. My mind goes to the 2007 game. First throw off the line of scrimmage, 87-yard bomb to Chris Henry, catches it. The camera's panning down because everybody's celebrating down the sideline. Camera pans back. When you see Palmer grabbing his knee.
Don't do it to me, no.
Yeah, we got to relive it. You asked me the tough question there.
Yes, I did.
The 2013 meltdown will hold a special place in my heart because I was actually there. The 2007 debacle, John Kitna comes off the bench. It just airs out of the stadium.
That was my first experience of John Kitna because I didn't watch the season before Palmer was the starter. And I remember watching that game and I was like, oh, sweet. I was worried about Polamalu. I should have been worried about apparently the other Samoan guy that they had on their defense. And I remember getting that Sports Illustrated issue of Carson Palmer in the stupid treadmill on the pool. And I'm like, God, nothing good can ever just be good. Because it was a touchdown pass that he threw, or like it got him in the red zone, high red zone, where you're like, we're scoring. And it was the Steelers in a wild card game. It was like things just repeat in a weird way.
It does. History has repeated itself in the worst ways. So it's but that's to kind of go back to your question. That's what got me involved. Corey Dillon's excitement on the ground game, watching Carson Palmer come in from USC, which was the biggest televised. Yeah, outside of the Buckeyes, which are always televised in my area, USC was always on TV then because they had the Palmer era, then the Leinart era, the Reggie Bush, and
when Pete Carroll,
all the big time guys. Pete Carroll was doing his thing.
Yep,
which is now legal.
Yeah. Did you see Johnny? I know I keep going off on tangents, but it's been a while since we talked. Did you see Johnny Manziel told Shannon Sharp that he's no longer going to be on the Heisman stage until they give Reggie Bush his Heisman back?
I did.
Finally, somebody said something. Somebody with an actual voice, like in the fraternity, finally said something. Yeah, it's Johnny Manziel, but it is a little bit ridiculous and hypocritical now because.
But because the last two Heisman, I believe I was reading, the last two Heisman winners have made a combined $12.5 million off NIL deals, which is basically a lot less than what Reggie Bush ever raked in on his likeness. And that I have complaints about Terrell Pryor in the Sugar Bowl that they stripped from him. When Jim Tressel finally got his first SEC win in the bowl era. Yeah. And they stripped it away from him for things that would be totally legal now. Let me sign some autographs and some paraphernalia.
Pay for some tattoos. Yeah.
Yeah, pay for some tattoos.
That was the big thing that stood out. I remember he's like, oh, Jim Tressel, the guy in the sweater vest, was buying his quarterback tattoos in the offseason. That's strange.
But now it's, these kids have no consequences for any of their actions. So
it's the Wild West. I think that's what we need to we should just embrace it, because also now they're already talking about expanding college football playoff to 14 teams, and the Big Ten and SEC are hogging like 6 of the bids to go into the playoff. It's a little bit ridiculous, but that's another conversation.
It is ridiculous. But I can see teams not starting their starters during the bowl games is the reason they're thinking that. And that, like you said, we'll definitely tackle that topic another day, because it robs the fans, it robs the TV ratings. I don't love that a player can just wake up and be like, I'm not playing today because it's not the glory. When 10 years ago, if you made a bowl game, it was an honor. And even before then, 20 years ago, it wasn't even a question. Yeah. As long as you're on national television in front of a wider spread audience post New Year's, that was a big deal. That was a big honor. You put up the fingers on how many bowl games you won in a row, regardless if it was a national title or not. So I don't love the new era that we're in that aspect, but another conversation for another day. I won't spin that web. We'll press on.
Yes, it's time to get to the fun stuff. This is what the offseason is here for. The NFL We kind of had a conversation in the VSN chat. I think it might have been before you were on, but we last season after talking the gridiron ended, we were seeing about maybe continuing it into the offseason. And shout out to one of the other shows on Variety Sports, but Out of Your Falcon Mind was like, dude, we do shows year round. And as long as you're talking about somebody's team, people will be listening. So we're talking about free agency, and this is all a moot point until the new league year. And there's already things that have been probably negotiated, and dominoes are going to fall fairly quickly. But I went out, I found my wish list. I guess I put them in ranked order. One of them I have absolutely no interest in touching, but he's there just because he does fit a need on this team. First off, with the Bengals over the past 2 seasons, disappointing to lose in the AFC Championship. Really disappointing to not ever have a healthy Joe Burrow except for 2 weeks where we look like the best team in the NFL. But this is 2 years wasted out of a window, and now we're seeing the after effects because they franchise tagged T. Higgins, hopefully looking to work out an extension, and it's all pointing to Tyler Boyd being gone. So we're going to have to be able to find a new slot or have one of the guys that are already on the team take over that role. Things are changing, and this window is not going to be open forever. But over the past 2 seasons, what have you seen as the biggest hole that's held this team back? Why have we not won the Lombardi Trophy in this 3-year window when we know Joe Burrow is a top 5 quarterback in the league?
Well, my obvious answer is going to be right and left tackle positions. We've been playing musical chairs with them.
He's frozen here.
Can you hear me?
For a live stream.
Are we back?
You hear me now, Jordan?
I can hear you now.
I think so.
Okay, I'm back. To answer your question,
did you hear the question? Or?
Yes, sir. I heard the whole question. To answer his question, the big positions that have held us back from winning a big one, in my opinion, I'm always going to point to the tackles positions. We've been playing musical chairs. Joan Williams hasn't worked out. We signed the right tackle from Dallas. He didn't work out. He ended up tearing his ACL. We tried to keep him on the roster for a little bit last year. Ended up releasing him.
Oh, yeah. Lyle Collins. Now I can think of his name.
And then we brought in the tackle from Kansas City. It's working out, but we moved Joanne Williams to the right side. It's not working out again. So, but the tackle positions and the defensive tackle position, I truly believe at the 3 tech, we haven't had anybody effective in that position since Larry Ogunjobi got injured and then was departed. So I think, and we didn't play a Super Bowl with him, which absolutely, that a lot happened in that game. I'm not saying he would have made all the difference, but he had 9.5 sacks going into the postseason. And that's something that you can't turn your nose at. We haven't had much pressure from the defensive tackle position when it comes to sacks because both BJ Hill and DJ Reader are they're big run stoppers.
Yeah. They
free up the defensive end zone. But that I think that's definitely stopping us in safety this year. We played this game of franchise tag with Jesse Bates. He departed and went to Atlanta, played some of the best ball of his life. PFF had him ranked in the top 4. He was a top number 1 safety for a while, I think up until about week 9. So it's just a position of paying players after their rookie contracts, and that's something Cincinnati is like, maybe we'll see. And
except for one guy,
except for one guy, but those are the positions I would honestly say: defensive tackle and just the tackle position in general on offensive line, left and right. Yeah. You fix those, and I mean that's Joe Burrow has more time to throw in the Super Bowl. Guys get open. We can kind of claim tight end, but collectively, as a tight end group, they had statistically better stats as a group than they did with Hayden Hurst playing tight end full time the season prior. So Joe Burrow's going to find open people. But
he doesn't really favor the tight end in his attack either. He did in college when he had Thad Moss, but Thad Moss was split out. He honestly, not that he doesn't want to throw to a tight end, but that's just not. He's not like every other quarterback where that's his safety blanket. Right. His safety blanket is the guy running the deep ball because he has the confidence that he's going to be able to complete that every time. I want them to get a tight end mainly because same reason why I want them to get a tackle. And we differ in kind of that opinion. You want to bring in a free agent more at right tackle. I would rather see it be filled in the draft because then I know we're going to have a solid presence there. It didn't work with Jonah Williams, but now Orlando Brown Jr. is kind of locked down that side. He looked good. I would say they need a better group overall around him. But this is a sixth right tackle. Whoever starts on opening day is going to be the sixth right tackle in the last 6 years to play for this team. And it's no longer you just need one and the other one can kind of be whoever. Pass rushers rush from both sides. And these guys move all around. Like J.J. Watt used to pass rush once on every offensive lineman and see who was going to be the easiest for that day. And then that's the position he was playing. These are specialists that we're seeing on the defensive side of the football. And you need to match that with what you have on offense. And the offensive line, in total, I like the individual pieces like OBJ, like Orlando Brown Jr. and Karras at center. But honestly, Kappa has left a little to be desired, and nobody's ever filled that right tackle spot. So there's I think there's more holes in the offensive line than we'd like to give them credit for.
Oh, I absolutely agree with you.
All right. Let's talk about the one free agent that we have kind of both put down as guy on our wish list. Christian Wilkins is going to be leaving Miami, former national champion at Clemson. I think he might have won 2. I know he at least won 1. He was part of that Clemson team with Deshaun Watson that upset Alabama. He was the big fat guy that could do the splits. If you've seen the celebration videos, that was Christian Wilkins. I like this guy a lot because he's been a captain for the last 3 seasons. Being a captain on your rookie contract, you can say what you want about it, but I think having your teammates see you as a leader that early on, that's really big for him. He's a guy that can stop the run because the run defense wasn't that great. We talk about DJ Reader and BJ Hill being run stuffers. The run defense was kind of middle of the pack last year. Christian Wilkins can stop the run, but he can also generate that inside pocket pressure that we've seen. That's what gets Patrick Mahomes and Josh Allen. That's what makes those guys uncomfortable. They can run through the middle of your defensive line. They're good all day. But if you can press them this way, and we know our defensive ends can contain guys, I think Christian Wilkins would solve quite a bit of problems, and he can play 3 technique or 1 technique. He's kind of that middle of the road. He's 6'4", 310. So he's not the biggest guy, but he's not super tiny like Geno Atkins. I think that he poses a lot of good things for the Bengals if they would be able to work something out with him.
I absolutely agree with you. He's definitely on my wish list, especially coming from the 3 technique, kind of giving us that Larry Ogunjobi, Geno Atkins pressure when it comes to making a quarterback uncomfortable and getting him into Sam Hubbard and company's arms. So we know our defensive ends are going to do their job. We know Miles Murphy is going to get a lot more playing time. You know, PFF had him graded some good things that you don't necessarily see pop on tape. So I was a little harsh on him. Lou knows what he's doing. Yeah, he broke him into the NFL. You got to learn the game first. As much as we wanted to see him go in and, night in and night out, wreak havoc. But I think we got something special moving forward. But my second guy, if we didn't get Wilkins, I have Leonard Williams on my list, coming from the Seahawks. He got traded midseason from the Giants to the Seahawks. I think he definitely fits that. I just think he fits that attitude role that Cincinnati is really kind of lacking.
Too. He's been around. He was a Jet, then a Giant, and then he got traded to the Seahawks. He's been in a lot of different locker rooms, and he's seen the worst of the worst. I would say when his time in New York was when they were bad in both. Like the Jets and the Giants were both down after their runs or whatever you wanted to call them. I know that he was there. He's a little bit older for my taste, but that would be, if you're looking, we need to fill some kind of leadership on this team. Everybody's super young. Bringing in a guy like that can produce at an older age, and he's a big man. Like that's a guy that you bring in for your size, and he just makes an impact because of his presence. Like that's the kind of guy I see Leonard Williams being.
And he's 30, so in my opinion, bringing him in to the table at least and telling him, hey, you're going to be with Joe Burrow, you're going to be with the young defensive ends that still have it. We've been to 2 AFC championship games in 3 years. Let's work something out. And I'll kind of ring the bell and reminisce of when Denver got that defense together with DeMarcus Ware and company. They had younger guys in place that needed that locker room presence. And I think that's where Cincinnati's defensive line is currently right now. They need a guy that's played a lot of football, seen a lot of things, that DeMarcus Ware presence. I think he gives us. I think both players, not to take anything away from Christian either, both players give them that edge, that experience. And
Yeah,
ultimately, that got Peyton Manning. Peyton Manning did great things offensively, but
yeah,
that
it was the
defense
defense. Yeah,
blanketed people night in and night out.
it
And I
was
think that's where Cincinnati has to look.
it was something I've never seen before. That defense that they had that season. Obviously, I made the excuse that it was AJ McCarron because I went to the game that they played in Denver that year, so I made that excuse. Up until very recently, I had never seen the Bengals win in person because the Broncos were undefeated against them in Denver for however long. But I think continuing on that veteran presence and somebody that has recent championship pedigree. And going back to that 2015 Denver team, not only did they bring in DeMarcus Ware, but they got a guy named TJ Ward. And not many people really knew about him outside of the markets that he played in. He was in Tampa for a little bit, and then he was in Denver before that. That was a guy very similar to, if you watch Denver now, Kareem Jackson.
Cleveland gave him a name.
Yeah, he's that guy that's physical. He was a captain, and the defensive backfield can be that catalyst. And I think L'Jarius Sneed, the fact that he's going to be a free agent this season, he's this is a second contract guy. And look what we did with Mike Hilton. Mike Hilton was a great player when he was in Pittsburgh, and we brought him in here and he elevated things. He came in and he made sure that everybody was held to a standard. I think L'Jarius Sneed, now that he's a 2-time Super Bowl champion, and very recently seen what Patrick Mahomes is able to do. I would love a defensive back that's seen Patrick Mahomes in practice, because then you're like, oh, sweet, somewhat of an advantage. Because right now we're just going off what we see on film, and that can change week to week. But he knows how he prepares. L'Jarius Sneed, honestly, that's my number one free agency wish. If I were to put it in an order, L'Jarius Sneed would be number one for me. I want to get another defensive back in here because our DBs weren't great last season. We were able to cause some pressure, but there were some holes, and there were young guys trying to fill in. But since Bates hasn't been there, it's been rough. And I think Sneed might calm things down, and he would be a guy that's there for a little bit of time, because you'd be signing him to his second deal. It might cost you a little bit more, but I think it would be worth it in the long run.
It is. You look at Awuzie, came off ACL surgery. He's a warrior. I will always applaud him. Gave us everything day in, night out. Never going to take anything away from the man. But there were times in the season where you saw him get burned uncharacteristically, if you compare the play of the season before the injury. And I think that did definitely catch up to him. Cam Taylor-Britt was breakout before his injury. He was on 4 interceptions, 1 pick six. The man was on an absolute tear. So, yeah, Sneed and Cam Taylor-Britt, with Mike Hilton with one more year under his belt.
In the slot.
For us in the slot. Maybe we bring in a veteran safety and kind of play the game with Dax Hill, putting him in places that it's going to benefit us more. Yeah, I could see Lou Amorello would absolutely go crazy over that. That would kind of remind me of when the Patriots won one of their Super Bowls. They brought in Brandon Browner. Yep. They paid Darrelle Revis to come over, and it just, those two guys in the secondary allowed that defensive line to do whatever they wanted. They just put them on an island, gave them a safety every now and then, and said, good luck, guys. And I think that would kind of give us characteristically the same layout. You got two guys that you can lock on an island and let your defensive line do their worst. And Lou's all about dialing up some pressure, so that would be definitely an interesting impact and dynamic.
And we, in today's NFL, being a good defense, you have to be able to get after the passer and make him uncomfortable, and you have to be able to cover these receivers. And the more guys you can bring in, especially because just the depth, because we did see so many injuries in the cornerback and DB room last season, it would be, now you don't have to rely. I love Cam Taylor-Britt, and I think that he's going to have a long time here, hopefully, is what I'm thinking. But him not having to play that prominent number 2 or number 1 corner role where you can give it over, or maybe he's not the premier guy. I just think adding depth at a place where you don't have depth can never be a bad thing. And you do have to spend money in this league to be successful. You do have to be able to be a little bit risky. If you just stand pat and do whatever you want to do, like we have a system, this is what Cincinnati does, then you're going to end up like the Colorado Rockies. And you're just going to continue, like, bring the fans in for the stadium experience. Bring in all those opposing team fans because they don't get to see their guys play.
That's where the Blue Jackets are. I can buy a ticket online now for $10, and it's damn near close to the ice. Great to take the kids to, but miserable for Dad because my team sucks and won't spend any money or draft capital to make any improvements. So yeah, I 100% feel you there.
Let's talk about what I have Hunter Henry on my list. We already kind of talked about tight end, and I agree. They don't need to take a big swing. I would just like something a little bit more solid. But we both have an offensive tackle on the free agency list. I'm not super big on bringing in free agency offensive linemen. That's what the Bengals have done past 3 years. That's been one of their biggest areas of spending, and that's why I don't like it. Because when you pay for a free agent offensive lineman, nobody lets an all-pro go. Nobody really just cuts an all-pro lineman. They always try and figure it out. Like there's a reason Jason Kelsey, who shout out to him, just retired after 14 seasons with the Eagles. He was in Philadelphia because they knew what they had in him. And Jeff Stoutland, if they were to trade him, would have gone into Howie Roseman's office and kicked his ass. Like they don't just let their top guys go. So you're getting B-level guys and you're paying them A-level money because they have all these other options, and everybody thinks, I'll get him into my system and my quarterback will be able to deal with whatever deficiencies that he has. Normally, when you see deficiencies on tape, those things are the player. And I put Michael Wenwood down, a guy coming out of New England, and you have Tyron Smith, a guy with a much higher pedigree, but he's aging and has been injury-riddled over the past few seasons. What are the benefits that you see of bringing in a Tyron Smith if they were to go that route in free agency again?
The benefits would be strictly short-term because I'm looking strictly on kind of what we touched on in the beginning of the show. The window it's not as wide open as it was 3 seasons ago. So if we're gonna, and that kind of goes to my defensive mindset, bring in somebody older, bring in somebody that can get it done right now. The questions and uncertainty of Joe Mixon and what's going to be our run game. If we're not going to spend money there, or we're not going to bring in a shiny free agent and we're going to draft one, then let's put them behind a veteran line that can get it done right now. And along with the protection of Joe Burrow, because I don't want Joe Burrow winding up like Andrew Luck. And that's kind of in the back of my mind that's just kind of where it's heading, because every year it's something. Now we're getting hurt in camp. We're having a hip issue.
Well, we don't play football in camp. We don't play football until the season starts,
that's terrible. That's our offensive line coach drives me absolutely wild with that. You bring in 3 separate free agents 2 years ago that played in all different systems, and we're not going to play any preseason games together. Traditionally, you played the line. Coaches, good coaches, you guys will be holding hands up until fucking game day. And I'm going to use language on this show, and I apologize for that. You're going to be holding hands. You're going to be wiping each other's ass. You're going to be wiping each other's sweat off your forehead. You're going to be knowing what you're doing at all times. You got to learn each other's body language, when you're hurt, when you're ready to go, how to block, how to communicate. If I tap you on my right shoulder, you got to know that means I'm going left. If I tap you on the left, you got to that means I'm shifting to your right. And we have none of that communication. The communication for the Bengals, unfortunately, it's not there till week 3 or 4 because, we're not going to play any preseason. We don't want our guys banged up. If you're going to make an investment, you got to cash it in as a coach. And that's just, that's its own conversation, but it drives me wild. You played the offensive line. I haven't, but as a coach myself, these guys are holding each other's hands up until it's time to say hike for the first time live. And it just drives me nuts. If you want a
successful team. It's something that my dad was my youth coach. So from 7 until I went into high school, and then every coach that I had afterwards, they all said the right things. Whether or not they did the right things is another story. Just FYI, college sports is not. You have to really love the game because the love of the game is out of it in college sports. That's all I'm gonna say. So not discouraging anybody. If you get your scholarship, go with it. But
I play junior college ball, so I have a smaller understanding than you, but I do understand it becomes it becomes more of that business mold. And
You
with
just have to be
NIL, it's
around
now
each
more
other.
than ever.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you have to be around each other. So COVID's kind of thrown a wrench into that. Now everybody watching film on their iPads instead of sitting in the facility. And I listened to Mark Schlereth because he's on our local station, and he was on the Hogs with Washington back in '91 when they won their Super Bowl. Then he was on the 2 Super Bowl teams here in Denver when they had Terrell Davis. One of those was a 2,000-yard season, and it's one of the better offensive lines that I've seen in recent football memory. They had Gary Zimmerman at left tackle, Tom Nalen at center. They had Mark Schlereth at left guard. He said that we watched film together because then if one of us sees something, we communicate it all right there. And like you were saying, when the snap happens, we've seen this before and we've seen it all together, and we all are actually seeing it. When we're watching film separately on our iPads, I may see something. I'm just going to probably assume everybody else sees something. If we don't have a meeting, I'm not going to be able to communicate with that. I might see it in practice and then it doesn't get picked up. The lack of communication and the lack of camaraderie is concerning. And as an offensive line coach in the NFL, you need to know that's the biggest thing. It's not whether these guys are athletic or can run a sub 540, which there were offensive linemen getting hurt at the combine last week because it's the dumbest thing that we continue to do, making them do all those field drills. But you just got to be 5 guys in a room. And you got to have the common goal and a common language. Common language is the biggest key to success in any room of any football team. If you guys speak the same language, you will be able to do at least half of everything right. You might get out executed every now and then, but nobody will have a missed assignment.
You hit the nail on the head. I couldn't agree with you more. From a coaching perspective and somebody that played in junior college level, yep. It's all about coaching. It's all about camaraderie. And I'm going to go ahead and trash him. Frank Pollock's been kind of a disaster since we brought him back.
Wasn't he supposed to be a guru?
To develop.
Wasn't he
He's supposed to be a guru? Glass eaters, right? Guru. Let's develop. Let's get guys in here. That's why we're spending more money right now on the offensive line than the Bengals ever have. We ranked, I think, number 6 last year out of all the teams with money spent on the offensive line.
Do you think Pollock was the reason? Pollock was the reason that Whitworth decided not to come back for a run, or was Whitworth never going to come back?
I would say Pollock has definitely got to be a top 4 reason. I mean, we had guys departure and left and right. I mean, our guard during that area is playing phenomenal ball for Baltimore. So you look at the guys that departed from that team, they all went and they played a couple more years somewhere else. So definitely, it's not like these guys didn't have tread left or couldn't play the game of football effectively because they all went and won somewhere else. And one of them won a ring somewhere else. So that's mind blowing. A lot of that does come to coaching and our development. I mean, you look back at Cedric Ogbuehi and you look back at the guy we just drafted from Clemson. His name slips my mind because Jackson Carman doesn't even suit up for 5 games of the season. That's a second round pick.
That's a waste of a laundry load because he's not getting on the field. That's just a waste of a load of laundry now.
We got guys that were drafted in the 6th round outperforming our higher draft picks. There is a coaching and scouting issue in Cincinnati that when it comes to offensive line, it's got to be figured out. I mean, whether that's I know college is underdeveloped in these guys too. With the conference, everything that you just said hits it on the head. Lack of camaraderie. Everything's on an iPad. Everything's separate. They're coming out of college and, it's taking, we'll give them 2 or 3 years. We're treating it like it's AA and single A baseball. Oh, it's okay. Yeah. He needs some snaps. He needs a plate appearance, about 200 plate appearances, then he'll start hitting the ball. Well, about 200 sacks later, your quarterback's dead. So, I mean, that's the game and the time we live in. It's underdeveloped players and offensive line.
That first injury where the guard is the one that makes contact with Burrow's knee. And I roasted the wrong guard. I had the wrong guy in it, and he reached out to me. That was the best part about it. It was the early stages of the show.
Michael Jordan reached out?
No, it was the other guy that I thought it was. Who's the guy that got cut right before that? It was bad because he reached out to me, and then I got to throw back at him. Well, I'm sorry. I didn't even realize you didn't get cut. I didn't even realize you weren't even on the field. But it was a wild exchange. Yeah, I said back then, like, if your offensive line is the one tearing your quarterback's knee, there's a bad problem. It's a bad problem.
But we said it's because we got rid of Frank Pollock. Well, we brought Frank Pollock back, and we've been signing guys left and right. And everybody that we drafted has been underdeveloped. We got the center from Georgia 2 years ago. He's never found the field. Jackson Carmen's never found the field. Akeem Adeniji was a 6th-round pick, and he found the field because he just purely works his ass off. I was happy to see him take some snaps to the Vikings this season. Tip your hat to him. Definitely showed that it wasn't a Cincinnati issue. So it just blows my mind that we continue with the coach. But yeah, I have Teron Smith on my list just to bring somebody that's been to the playoffs a few times. With Dallas, still has good PFF grades. He was graded above the 2 tackles that we started last season overall. I know he's injury riddled. My second guy is Trent Brown from the Patriots. He's a little bit younger. He's got some leeway and flexibility. I personally think he's being cut because the New England's cleaning house, and they're at that point of the organization where they almost have to. They just got rid of their greatest coach of all time. They're bringing in a rookie head coach. So I think Trent Brown's got some tread left to give. And if we're going to draft a tight end in the 1st round and not go with the guy from, whether it's Oregon State or the right tackle from Georgia, which is both high on my prayer list that we go to. Everybody's screaming, tight end, but a tight end's not going to protect our $200+ million investment. So we gotta look past that. But I'll let you move forward. Oh, my bad.
No, it's good because that was kind of, it's almost like you knew who we didn't talk about our mock drafts. I told you who my free agents were, but I didn't tell you who I put in the mock draft. And it's funny that you bring up Fuanga from Oregon State because he's probably going to be making an appearance. You said you have a wish list. I did a mock draft with all the picks that the Bengals are going to have. I did mine through Fanspeak. And I used Goodberry's consensus was the draft board and like the needs. So if you wanted to set up your own Fanspeak, I know they're not a sponsor or anything, but if your computer can run the system, because they have ads out the ass. So I was doing it the other night, like sitting at the kitchen table, and it sounded like my computer was going to start levitating and like just fly up into space. My dad's
LimeWire days.
Yeah, it was bad. I thought I was downloading some kind of virus. I was just trying to draft 7 picks for the Cincinnati Bengals. I just want to get over with this, please. So let's go faster. But that's where I did mine. So my 1st round pick at number 18, I didn't do any trades or anything, and Cincinnati doesn't really do that unless it's moving back. No. I did put Talizi Fuanga. The guy from Oklahoma is still there, Guyton, and he was kind of rated higher on the board, but it goes back to that year we drafted Chase, and I was on college radio having that debate of whether or not you should take the tackle or the receiver, go with the relationship or go with a guy that's going to protect you. Well, not often do you have a chance to get both, and you could have both the receiver that you had and another really good offensive tackle. Probably not the same caliber. I'm not going to sit here and say that Fuanga's Penei Sewell reincarnated, but Oregon State, you want a guy like this, especially if you're Cincinnati, because Oregon State 3 seasons ago when Fuanga was starting off was not a good football team. Oregon State was not somebody that you worried about, and they put themselves into national conversation, and they were ranked in the top 10. They were part of this Pac-12 this past season that was really, really good. I think Talizi Fuanga, if we were able to get him at 18, that's a no-brainer. That would not only solidify this carousel that you have at right tackle, you could still do one of the free agency moves at tackle and bring in Talizi Fuanga because he could sit behind a veteran and he doesn't have to be starter right away. You obviously want him to develop into that, but it's a tough transition, and we talked about it. College football doesn't get these guys ready. So I had Fuanga as the 1st pick for the Bengals at number 18.
That's who I had too, and I hope and pray that we get it. I really do. I believe he's a day one guy, an impact guy. They're going to give him the reps. They're going to give him the start. It would kind of alleviate the thoughts of, well, I know free agency is before the draft, but I would like us to at least, if we're going to sign a 2nd tier guy to bring over and tackle, and then draft this guy to make sure we have somebody behind him, I would absolutely love that. And I think we got 5-year window before we have to worry about paying him. So it kind of resets the clock on one of our tackles. We're playing premium on the left side already. We got guys cut with expiring contracts at guard and center coming up. So definitely we want to start that rebuild. It would be now more than ever because 18 pick. I don't see us getting many other high picks unless something catastrophic happens in the next season or two. So right now is a premium time to pick an offensive lineman rich draft as well.
It's a good offensive line draft, and me putting Taliti Fuanga as the first pick for the Bengals means he's going to go pick number 17. Because I did my first ever mock draft was the year that Frank Ragnow was coming out, and I was like, oh, please. And it was the pick before, and that was the year we ended up with Billy Price. And no offense to all your Buckeye fans that you're probably bringing over to this show, but my God, Billy Price was the worst draft pick that I can remember for a while with this team. And I was like, this is
it's up there with Cedric. It's up there with Cedric Ogbuehi for me. Drafting Cedric Ogbuehi, knowing he had the knee issues in college and post surgery, when all those other guys
you want is not there. If the number one guy at the position you want is not there, don't just draft the next guy.
We whiffed and
pick the best player available.
I was praying we would have got Tannenbaum, the center that ended up going to Baltimore. But because I got to watch a lot of, or Linderbaum, I apologize. Yeah, I got to watch a lot of them, being in Big Ten country. I got to watch them night in and night out. And as much as I'm an Ohio State fan, I was not rooting for Billy Price. But the Billy Price trade gave us great things right now. So, BJ Hill has been a cornerstone in our championship runs, both through the AFC. So I'm a bad story gone bad. So I'm sorry, bad story gone good. So we got a little something out of it.
Yes. Moving on to pick number 2. This is why I know this is never going to work out. Xavier Worthy fell to pick number 48. So he was there. And like I said at the beginning of the show, we franchised T. Higgins and we're losing Tyler Boyd. And I had the same thoughts. And this was brought up in our network chat the other day that Xavier Worthy is going to be John Ross 2.0. And yes, the comparisons are there. He did just beat John Ross's 40 record at the combine. I will counter whoever wants to say that with this. John Ross played one season at a Washington team that was not one of the premier teams in the country at the time. This was not Michael Penix's Washington. This was with, I believe it was Jake Browning. It was. You're dead on the money. Browning's freshman year or something like that. So, not saying that Browning's a bad quarterback, but it was Washington. That's what I'm trying to say. It was Washington. Xavier Worthy's been at Texas. He's the number one threat for the last 3 seasons. He's been a starter. I see this as a totally different situation. And if he's there at 49, you can't tell me he's not going to be the best player rated on the board. I feel like there's no way he falls out of the first round, especially with his combine. But if he's there, I want him. And I want him bad.
I totally agree with you. I love I'm still a fan of Yo Shavash. I'm still a fan of Charlie Jones. But those guys don't possess the speed that we're looking for on the outside. So I definitely, with him and Higgins, even if we took Xavier and put him in packages, I would love to kind of see it. It would definitely free up some of our offense. Our guys are getting doubled regardless. So to have a guy with that much speed as a third option on a team like that right now, that would be fireworks. It would take me back to the Chad Johnson, Chris Henry, and TJ Hushmanzada days when they each had 1,000 yards apiece that year going into that playoff run in 07. Would definitely love to see it.
I've said I wanted Xavier Worthy all the way back at I think it was when they beat Bama, and then even in the Red River game, I was yes, I would love Xavier Worthy alongside Jamar Chase and in the same offense as T. Higgins. I want that badly, so please give me that. If that happens, it's there. Who's another guy who would you think in the second round? Is there somebody that you think the Bengals would pick, or who's the next guy down on your draft list? If it wasn't Fuanga or anybody like that.
That's a tough. I'm kind of hoping that maybe we look in the secondary if we don't make a splash. I think one of the corners from Alabama will be there in the second round. I would love to make a splash there. We don't sign a solid secondary player or we don't bring anybody back. Definitely got to and I know we did it the year before. I know we focused a lot. We got Jordan Battle in round 3. We got DJ Turner in round 2. Cam Taylor Britt was a round 2 guy.
Mm-hmm.
But that kind of fits our mold, so I wouldn't be shocked to see us go with something in the secondary.
Yeah, I see. I didn't just do offense just because I don't want to take up your whole night, and I do want to make sure that I get into the other stuff on the show. I'll go quickly through the rest of them. So the Bengals have another pick in the 3rd, a pick in the 4th, 2 in the 5th, a 6th, and 2 7s. So in the 3rd, I had them take Javon Bullard, the safety from Georgia. In the 4th round, Tommy Eichenberg, which you're probably very familiar with, the linebacker from Ohio State. He was there. In the 5th, Sione Vaki from Utah. I did not realize he was going to be there. That dude, if you have not watched Pac-12 football, he was Utah's safety / starting running back. He's an all-around athlete. Again, it's not good production of what happened. Now I can't think of his name. Who was Jabril Peppers. He reminds me of Jabril Peppers with his athleticism, but I could see him being successful because he's not going to be a very high draft pick. If he's projected in the 5th round, maybe some team takes a chance on him early, like if somebody really knows him. But Sione Vaki at that pick would be a steal if you get him in the 5th round.
Would you have a Cade Stover in round 3? If he was there for tight end? I know he ran a subpar 4.6 in the combine, but I got to watch a lot of them as an Ohio State fan, and I have him as a round 3 pick if we don't make a splash in tight end. I definitely think he'll be there in the 3rd. He does excellent run blocking.
I was saying 3rd as a little bit. I've seen him in different places. I think when I was doing PFF, I almost saw him late 3rd, early 4th. I don't know what I don't know. I didn't address tight end in the draft because I said that they could possibly address tight end, or I think they can bring back the guys that they have in the room for cheap deals, and just it's not a premier need to me.
Right.
3rd round for a tight end is pretty. It's run of the mill. I don't hate it because I can see why. It's not like you're taking somebody in the 1st round that needs to produce. If it's a 3rd round tight end, you give them some options and you give them a couple of seasons. Cade Stover wouldn't be bad at that point. He's a big guy. If you can get more big targets, especially if we do lose T in the red zone, and now I'm thinking back to the Eifert days too.
A big guy, and I love his pedigree because he was a former linebacker turned tight end. So a lot of times you see him sit down in space. It's that experience as a linebacker to know where that linebacker is going to be and not going to be. So I think he could kind of bring a different, not just as an Ohio State fan, but just anywhere he goes and is drafted, he's going to bring a lot of on-the-field IQ that's not going to show up at the combine.
Yeah, I didn't know that about him, and it makes sense because that's when I was watching the Hunter Henry film. That's what I really liked about him. He knows where the zone holes are, and if you have a tight end, that's what Travis Kelce has become one of the best receiving tight ends in the history of the league on doing. He just finds the hole in the zone and knows that Mahomes is looking for him. Yeah, I think that Stover will probably be able to transition fairly easily. Big Ten tight ends tend to do so. That's what we've seen over the past however many seasons. 2nd, 5th round pick, I picked up Cody Schrader, the running back from Missouri.
I like that.
I did too, because I do think that they're going to have to move on from Maxon, if not before the season, at some point during. Maybe it's a trade and give him off to a team that's willing to give up some assets for him because he produces. And it makes me upset because they just didn't use him enough over the past 2 seasons. I think they could have gotten so much more production if they would have just turned around and handed Joe Mixon the ball a little bit more often. Whether
nobody here disagrees with that.
Yeah, I know that you don't. And I hope that people out there listening, if you're Bengals fans, you recognize that the guy he was a 1,000-yard producer back-to-back seasons. And then he just didn't get the ball all of a sudden. The offense totally flipped, and it hurt them at times. If you don't take what the defense gives you, if they're going to cover and double Jamar Chase and T. Higgins, run the ball a little bit, run some play action. That's what's going to be open. If they're doubling everything and just clouding like Vic Fangio taught the entire NFL to do, then you got to change things up. And I think Joe Mixon's got an unfair shake. And I could see, if we're going to talk about that quickly, I could see him fitting in with Tennessee in that rebuild. And maybe he's their next running back after Derrick Henry.
Following his old offensive coordinator that used him a lot is now head coach at Tennessee. and his dad, the offensive line coach over in Cleveland, followed him, which produced him, amazing results in Cleveland. And Tennessee, I don't think they're going to be. I don't think they're going to be a pass-heavy team their first year in. Their identity has been a running team under Henry. Yeah, I would love to see that. Joe, it would honestly give Joe Mixon a good fit.
Yeah, no, and I want to see him go somewhere and do well. I know that he's got a checkered past, but he's made up for it. And when he was here, he's been a captain. And he's on the Bengals booth a lot because Lapham and Horde like to interview him. And he's been great in the interviews. He's like a stand-up guy that I could show if my kids at some point ask me who is a guy that I looked up to on the team that maybe was able to overcome some things, that would be a guy that I could look to. Like, he made a very bad mistake and it was in a very public fashion, and whatever the details were, it was still the wrong thing to do, but he came back from it and was a role model for a long time. Like Cincinnati, it was the joke when he got drafted. Cincinnati's they're just looking, it's the longest yard. Everybody's Pac-Man Jones, Joe Mixon. No, Joe Mixon turned his life around. He's not Pac-Man Jones anymore. He's a good guy.
Vontez Burfict was the villain. Pac-Man Jones was the accomplice. Reggie Nelson had the attitude in the secondary. Yeah, those were some different times.
Round 6, I picked up Xavier Thomas, edge rusher from Clemson. I know that we just got Miles Murphy too, so two young guys at pass rushers are at a premium. If you can pick one up late and get some production,
somebody on this current roster is not going to be there. I'm not dropping names at the moment, but there was definitely a lot of disappointments. Whether it be Cam Sample making an impact when it comes to the rush, and some other guys that couldn't stay healthy. So I think we're going to have a lot of new faces when it comes to outside or starting defensive ends.
Then 7th round, I picked up Fabian Lovett with their first 7th round pick, who was a defensive lineman out of Florida State. Again, trying to fill the inside a little bit more, stuff up the run, get a big body in there. And the last pick, it's tough because it's pick 252, so you're like at the very, very end of the draft, and I had no idea who any of the people were left, but I picked the Kingsley Eguakun, guard out of Florida. So SEC, that was basically my deciding factor for that pick. That's why I decided to go that direction there. But those were the picks that I had for the Bengals. Just moving through the entire draft, I think that it's totally unrealistic, and I've never hit more than like maybe 10% on any of the mock drafts I've ever done, not for lack of trying. But that was just where I was seeing it. I was trying to be as objective as possible. But yeah, if somebody falls to you, I'm going to snatch that. I'm not like these NFL GMs. I'm not going to take the entire 10 minutes. I would have the worst poker face of all time. Xavier Worthy's there at 49, and I'd be doing a flipping parade around the building. Like, yes, I am the greatest. I'm the best, smartest man alive.
Oh, yeah. I would have my Moneyball moment. I'd be pounding the table. Very pumped up.
Yeah.
If the cameras were back there, I'd be sorry for them.
Yes. If Bill Belichick's dog was running that draft, I would be giving him tons of treats and lots of belly rubs. That's what would happen if that situation ended up. Let's transition now from football. That was a lot of Bengals talk, and I appreciate it because I don't get to do that often. But you said you've been watching the Nuggets quite a bit. You're going on the double-double tomorrow, as you mentioned. So with that being said, I want to talk about a team. I'm put this as the banner here, and people might be thinking I'm being just a homer. This is a direct quote from Stephen A. Smith. Stephen A. Smith, after he made all of those comments about not wanting to come back to Denver because he doesn't like being here, the altitude messes with him. Imagine that. Stephen A. Smith is a prima donna, doesn't want to come to where it's a little bit adverse conditions. But he said the Nuggets might be toying with the West because they're not number 1 seed. They're still in that little bit of a bunch. They're like 2-3 right now. Niko and I have talked about it, and I've been hearing it from a lot of different places. This team does not need to be the 1 seed. It would be nice, but this team, they are. I don't see another team in the West beating them in a 7-game series. Just with the way that they've been able to handle everything, the running, the rub that they had before the All-Star break, coming back out of it, and now the heater that they've been on. Niko's been going to the games, and his dad was actually honored as one of the fans of the night a couple weeks ago. But it just seems like this team is They know what it takes to win a championship, and they're not stressed about a first seed.
No.
They're stressed about making sure everybody's healthy and ready to go, and let's go get this thing done for a second time.
They remind me as a Cleveland Cavs fan. They remind me of LeBron's first run with Cleveland. They didn't get a number 1 seed, I think, almost at all, exclusively, coming out of the East. But you knew that as long as LeBron would get, his crew together, it didn't really matter. And they kind of remind me of and I kind of think of the Miami Heat that way too, right now, because they're turning. The later in the season it goes, you get playoff Jimmy, and that's that's a different animal for Jimmy Butler. But I totally agree with you with the Nuggets doing that, because you look at OKC has got to play almost perfect ball night in and night out to be in the position they're at. And I don't see them taking the Nuggets in a 7 series. I think you'll get 6 out of it. I think we'll get 6 very competitive games. They're going to show where OKC has to grow and bring in maybe some veterans on the bench next season, because they have a lot of youth. But the Denver Nuggets are definitely, in my opinion, toying with the West right now, because they look relaxed. They're a team that's having a lot of fun even during their losses. And the Joker himself, he doesn't look to be taking things too seriously. You'll see a couple competitive games that are on, especially when it comes to the Lakers and stuff like that. But LeBron brings that villain side out of you.
Yes,
wherever you play him.
I think if you look at this team and look at the demeanor of Jokic, who is their best player, he will probably be a 3-time MVP by the time this season ends, no matter who ESPN is trying to push against him. It's just incredible what he's able to do. And I went to a game with Niko. It was before the All-Star break. I think it was even before Christmas. But watching the Nuggets in person, and I told him this sitting there, I did not realize how easily a person could score 30 points and have 12 assists. And then all of a sudden he's got 8 rebounds and he gets a triple-double in the middle of the third quarter. And I've played basketball in the playground. I'd never played very competitively. I was never on a basketball team, yet I can appreciate how difficult all of this is, because he's moving and he's making these plays without even looking, but it looks like he's standing still, which is a bad thing to say about an athlete, but it might be the best thing to say about an athlete. I don't think we've ever seen, and this is me taking words out of mouths of people who have played a long time in the NBA, like Larry Bird and Magic Johnson and Shaq. We have not seen somebody be able to run a game entirely from their mind and actually put it from what they hear in their head out onto the floor. That's something that we just have not been able to see with the skill and the ability and the consistency of what Nikola Jokic has done. And I think this is the reason why the Nuggets are in this situation. I think this is why I can sit here and confidently say, I know that they lost to the Suns last night, which busted their winning streak. You're going to drop a few games here and there. And if you're trying to keep people healthy, you don't necessarily care about games in the middle of the regular season. They got the Celtics.
And that's the nature of the marathon. The NBA is a marathon where, post All-Star game, it's a little more than half, but we all consider that is the halfway point when you start seeing more competitive. Mm-hmm. The teams that are going to make the championship run have the pedigree, and you start seeing it. But the Cavs are kind of being sluggish. That's a separate conversation. But yeah, it was tough to kind of see them lose to the Suns, and I did witness that. I was able to watch that here on the East Coast, super late. But anxiety gives you that. But I do think they're ultimately gonna come out of the West. I don't see a force stopping them in 7. And he's kind of playing basketball poetry in motion. I don't think he's the greatest player in the league right now, to kind of take down your co-host a little bit there. He talks about him like he's the greatest thing since PB&J.
He can walk on water, Jordan. That's what I told you.
I don't agree with that. I think he's on a great team and a great squad. I think he can score it kind of, any given night. He's always going to get his points, but I don't think he's the greatest. Gets everybody else
involved too. I think that's what separates him. That's where I'm not going to be as far onto the bandwagon as Niko is, but I do see him as moving towards that greatest, at least center of all time, because guys on the floor are sitting down there and he doesn't look, but he's finding Aaron Gordon for all of these dunks, and he's finding whoever is open, and he gets everybody else involved. Whoever He dribbles up the court and in his Serbian accent goes, "Okay, who has the hot hand? Do I have hot hand?" And he sinks a three. It's like, cool.
But
Okay,
I don't think
MPJ
he's going to win you games like a prime Shaq or guys that can absolutely dominate the boards and dominate underneath.
He dominated plenty on that playoff run, though. I
He
don't
did,
think
but we play in another, and maybe the time eras bother me because I look at old school centers, from the 80s, 90s, and even early 2000s, and it's just a different game that we play in now. So I don't
if
consider
Jokic was
him
playing against Shaq, he'd be hanging out around the 3-point line.
Yeah, Jokic would be.
Yeah, that's what I mean. Jokic would be around the 3-point line. He's like, okay, I'm not playing in the paint. No, thank you. I'm not going in there. That's a bear. You have a live bear in there. And I only wrestle bears in Serbia.
You gotta have Flint Tropics night wrestling a bear. If you get that reference,
can't you just give me like a normal size check? My bank says that they won't cash this one. Last thing that I'll keep you here for with the Nuggets, Michael Porter Jr.'s. He's been a hot button topic ever since he was drafted here because he was drafted with the understanding that first year was going to be a wash with his back injury. Is he going to be able to recover? And if he does recover, will he ever be that number one pick that we thought he was going to be in the past? He's gotten his contract. He's now an NBA champion, and he played a big part in those games. He's starting to play a bigger part in the games that we've seen down the stretch, and it really isn't – he's always been able to score. That was never an issue. The issue that I always bring up with Michael Porter Jr. when Niko and I talk about this was his defense and his attention to detail. Is he going to be willing to do the fundamentals correctly, or is he just going to want to hang out and play NBA jams and sit in the corner and try and shoot threes all day? Recently, and when the Nuggets were having their good run of basketball, and now I have to be blatantly honest, I did not see the Suns game the other night. I will probably watch a little bit of the Celtics game tonight when it's on. I don't know if he was the reason, if he fell off that attention to detail, but he was rebounding and he was playing defense better than I've seen him play in his entire career. And if he can put both sides of his game together, how good do you think Michael Porter Jr. can be? Could he be the next guy that leads this team? If Jokic isn't going to be the guy that wins you games, could MPJ be that guy?
I do. Off the small sample size that I get to see here on the East Coast, his game has been totally elevated since their championship run. You see a lot more effort plays, and whether that's health, I can't speak for him, but whether that's because the back's feeling better, so now I'm gonna box out in the paint. Now we're gonna elbow all the way down the court, give a little shoulder. But a lot of that to me is his attitude has just been elevated his game. You see a lot more grit coming out of him, and that's something you didn't see. Like I said, whether it was injury or just, well, I'm here now. But, seeing your team win a ring, being a part of that, having one of the best playing centers in the league right now, maybe that's finally clicking to him. Hey, this is my opportunity. And I think the light bulb has gone off because you see so much more defensive effort. You do see a lot of rebounding, stuff that he just little boxing out stuff that you really didn't see early in his career when he actually got on the court. But yeah, I do. I think Denver's going to get their first round pick out of him. I see it 110%, and I'm not just saying that because I was kind of critical on him early on. I thought he'll kind of forever be a bench role player. He'll kind of go around the league, make some impacts on some playoff teams that'll sign him. That's the route I thought he was going. But he's totally turned a corner. Some of the Suns game, I think collectively as a whole, from what I've watched, it was kind of a whole team effort. So if you go back and rewatch it, it was just one of those off nights. I've seen Donovan Mitchell when he's healthy with Cleveland. He has those nights, and that's kind of what Denver looked like coming out. They look like a team that was just kind of like, oh, we've been on a high. I'm not saying they took the night off because I don't think every athlete does that, but it was just an off shooting night. Shots that you normally see go down, it just didn't happen for him. Which a lot of uncharacteristic things kind of went down that night. But
and we saw what's going to happen in the playoffs if the Nuggets and the Suns play, because the Suns, and I think I can say the same thing about the Celtics, if they get out on top of you, it's going to be a long night. You're going to have to score 130 points just to make sure that you can keep up. because if their shots are falling, if they're making every one of their plays, they are tough. But if they're in a grinded out game for the first couple quarters, they start to lose that confidence in their ability, and then you give your offense a chance to oil themselves up. I see this is where the championship grit from last season is going to pay off. I think we're going to see a different Nuggets team. We're not going to see 16-4. That's not going to their record.
Right.
Same thing that Niko and I said about the Avalanche, because they did the same exact thing. I think they went to 6 games one time in their Stanley Cup run, 2 times, once in the finals and once in the second round against the Blues. And I said that, Brandon. That was a shot. That wasn't even a thinly veiled one. That was a direct shot, because I'm talking hockey after this, and I hate the Blues almost as much as I hate the Red Wings. But it was like, it's not going to happen again. But this team will now – you're not going to see them lose back-to-back games in the playoffs. The games that matter, when they're locked in, when they're 110% focused and know this is the only thing we have to worry about, this is a scary team. Michael Malone has pushing all the right buttons. And now he even said it this week after it was the game before the Suns. He's like, I just have to sit back and admire what we're able to do. Like this, when we came here to Denver and we were in middle of the road, are we going to make the playoffs? Are we not going to make the playoffs every season team? This is what we dreamed about, just being able to sit on the bench and watch the design of what we put together come to fruition. And now he's able to do that, and he's enjoying himself just as much as all the Nuggets fans are, which it's fun to see. Because when your professional athletes and coaches are having fun, that makes it a lot more fun to watch.
That's a dynamic you don't always get to see, especially, winning coaches are usually mild mannered, and they always look pissed off. I always think of like Bobby Knight.
Yeah, Popovich.
Popovich looks pissed on a good night. Even
that Air Force Academy in him. That Air Force Academy, no smiling whatsoever. And Mike Malone's from Popovich's coaching tree, but Mike Malone is anything but mild mannered. Dynasty. All right.
Well, you even look at Bill Belichick. Bill Belichick always looks like, his dog just took a shit on a computer and walked away.
Brady, I could get a quarterback from Foxborough High that can make this throw. I don't need you. You were a 6th round pick? Yeah, I can find somebody else to take your place lickety split, but just try me.
As much as he'd try to make Billy Zapp the next one.
Yeah, no, it didn't work out. Jordan, I thank you for your time. I appreciate it. I'm going to let you go because you are 2 hours ahead of me. So you're probably getting closer to winding down than I am. But I appreciate it, and we'll get you on again as things pop up. And obviously you're on VSN, so we'll probably be catching each other on one of those shows. But real quick, let everybody know what you have coming up. I know you mentioned Double tomorrow. When is the next Ohio Sports Talk dropping? Because I have been listening. I'm noticing you're lacking in your Buckeye wrestling content. And after this weekend, depending on how many people are going to the national tournament, you may need some psychotic wrestling coach that happens to fall asleep to college wrestling every night. I'm just saying that might be something that your fans of that show might want to listen to.
Yeah, we love to bring you on. If we got to adjust our time, normally we go at between 6 and 6:30 Eastern time. But if this wrestling psychotic coach would love to school this Marine over here in the world of wrestling, we can go later. But we'll be on 6:30 next Monday. We're going to talk everything Ohio as much as we can. A lot of things going on with the University of Dayton. A lot of things going on with Ohio NCAA men's basketball. Are they going to keep the coach because they're kind of going on a 4-1 hot run right now? The women's Big Ten just finished for the Buckeyes, finished second, but their head coach got Coach of the Year for NCAA. So they had an incredible run going forward. But lots to talk about. Come visit us. We're right here on Variety Sports Network. We'll be on Monday at 6:30 Eastern.
There you go. And then he'll be back for next season's Talking the Gridiron. We'll probably do something surrounding the draft. And then once training camps get started, we'll have some special Talking the Gridirons. I know Darren is probably in the same boat as we are. Like, I just want to talk. Like, I need that weekly hour and a half long, like therapy session, get my sports opinions out. But again, I appreciate you coming on. Be sure to check out Ohio Sports Talk right here on the Variety Sports Network. Jordan Maxon, thank you very much for stepping up and filling in. And I'll catch you on later on down the road.
We'll catch you later on around the road. I always appreciate being on your show. Always appreciate, talking gridiron. My first time here on far into the bench. I hope to be back and continue kicking ass. You guys do great work. I love listening to your insights on all sports as general, and just your grit, your information on offensive line. Bumping your heads and seeing the nosebleed and everything that you kind of bring to it. It's always a pleasure. So again, thank you for having me on. Kick ass at the rest of this show, and we'll see you soon.
All right. See you, Jordan. Appreciate it. All right. Everybody that's still tuning in, hopefully you are a Denver sports fan or at least a hockey fan, because that's what we're finishing up the show with. I don't have any other basketball opinions to throw out there. The Nuggets are the limitation. That's the depth of my pool. I was a communications and sociology major in college. My knowledge is very broad, but it's the kitty-sized pool. That's what I'm going to tell everybody. It's a kitty-sized basketball pool. It's a kitty-sized knowledge pool. NHL trade deadline. As we are talking, it is tomorrow at 3 p.m. Eastern time. So 1 p.m. Where I am. The Avalanche have been busy, so busy. In fact, I don't know. There is another one that I did not write down. So I have most of them written down. I am pulling up the Avalanche page to make sure that I don't miss anything else. Let's see. Yakov Trenin from Nashville. We traded we get Jeremy Hansel, and Yakov Trenin goes to Nashville. So we got a defenseman, traded one of our prospect forwards. We've got Brandon Duhaime from Minnesota. He was acquired for Brandon Duhaime is acquired for a third-round pick in this year's draft. Signed Jeremy Hansel to his entry-level contract. And then let's get into the meat and potatoes of things that we should probably be talking about here. The biggest trade, and I'm going to echo kind of some similar sentiments. I listened to their emergency podcast. We shout them out a lot. Griffin, Christian over at Tell It As It Is. I listened to the emergency podcast about the Bo Byram trade, and it is a big enough deal for an emergency podcast because this is a guy, when he was brought in, it was off of that World Juniors Canadian team with him and Newhook that won the gold and beat the U.S., but supposed to come in here, and as we had Cale Makar emerging, winning his Calder Cup and becoming a top 3 defenseman and now passing all of these Bobby Orr records, Bo Byram was going to be the next guy, and that was going to be the defensive pairing that's going to carry the Avalanche through into the coming generations. This obviously didn't go as smoothly. Injuries, concussions, not his fault, but he was not available for a good portion early on in his career. Newhook got a lot more early success. It's funny that now they're both being traded away. Newhook obviously going to Montreal. It was a needed move because he needed to be in a more prominent role so that he can develop into a true NHL forward. And I would say the same is probably true about Bowen Byram. This season was unexpected, and there's been a lot of twists and turns and things that we thought were going to happen that didn't happen. But nobody saw Sammy Girard playing as well as he has this season and taking over that number 2, kind of the second pair, being the offensive guy there. Josh Manson has played out of his mind, and Jack Johnson has been playing absolutely stellar hockey. Bo Byram found himself as like the 5th or 6th defensive option on this team, and the Avalanche have been very busy getting more defensemen through their other moves. So Bowen Byram, unfortunately, was the expendable part of the machine. It is also ironic because people have been talking about trading Sammy Girard for the last however many seasons in a row. That's obviously never come to fruition, and now the other guy that was supposed to be our stud and carrying us into the future is no longer going to be on the team in Bowen Byram. Wish him nothing but the best. Obviously, we're always going to have that 2022 season and then the parade where the police officers did not realize that they were talking to a defenseman that just won them the Stanley Cup, and he was almost escorted away from the parade. They thought he was a crazy drunk fan trying to get on the floats. But Bowen Byram will no longer be here. He's going to be going to Buffalo, and we receive Casey Middlestat. It's a 1-for-1 trade, which shows you the kind of talent and what people around the league see in Bowen Byram. I think that's kind of what you can pull from that. Getting Casey Middlestat, that is, we got rid of Ryan Johansson as well, which is a move that everybody expected. And as much as it would have been nice, Gensel got moved already. Crosby is probably never going to get traded. As much as as I like to listen to the rumor mills, and as much as I'm still going to sit here with my fingers and toes crossed for the next 13 hours or however long it is until 18 hours until the trade deadline actually happens, I do not know if Sidney Crosby is actually going to be here. There is still a possibility that another small move may happen. That's what the Avalanche and Chris McFarland, that's the strategy this season. Last year was very little done at the trade deadline, and we saw that came back to bite them. Well, this season, instead of taking a big swing on an Elias Pettersson or a Hannafin that's going to be super expensive and push you further and further along, you're going to have to give up more assets. We're not giving away as much, and we're getting pieces that will fill the holes. We're getting small pieces to fill in this giant pothole. We're putting in layers and layers of gravel to try and solidify this thing. I think Casey Middlestat will make this lineup, especially at the center position, way more successful depth-wise. That was the first trade that I wanted to talk about. A 2025 first round and Ryan Johansson go to Philadelphia in return for Sean Walker. Sean Walker, a defenseman, will now be suiting up in the burgundy and blue for the Colorado Avalanche, playing that blue line. He's obviously going to be very low in the rotation, but now with McDermott gone, he is going to have a spot on the bench. And he's a big guy. If you have enough, you can never have enough big defensemen that are willing to get in front of a puck. And if you're Sean Walker coming from Philadelphia, I know that the Flyers are having kind of an aberration of a season, but you go from Philly to Colorado and your cup chances go up from, let's say, 15% to 30% at least. Some say even higher than that. I don't think this team has been consistent enough where you can say that, but we haven't even seen all of these new pieces together on the Avalanche. They haven't even all been on the same ice because of the different times that they've been signing. So I think Sean Walker will fit in nicely on that bottom six pairing defensively. Curtis McDermott, like I mentioned, was traded to New Jersey. We got the signing rights to Zakhar Bardakov and a 7th-round pick in 2024. And McFarland has said, and he's made a lot of the NHL media, Elliot Friedman from Hockey Night in Canada, I'm sure Kevin Weeks over at ESPN has been thinking the same things. He's convinced everybody that the Avalanche are not done. With all the moves that have been made, there's still something coming. And then obviously Duhaime and the trade that we just had from Nashville, which I'll be a good reporter. Niko's not going to be here. I got to make sure I hold up our standard, right? That way he has a show to come back to. Can't burn the house down while mom's out. Let's see. Duhaime. And who else? Let's just go to the team. Oh, I'm on the team. Trade deadline. I would have liked to get Tarasenko, but he was going to be costing too much. I can't find the name, so I'm just going to move past it. NHL-wise, it's a little bit of a shift in philosophy. Trade deadline day used to be where all the moves happened. Teams have started to realize that it's a little bit too close to the start of the playoffs, so they'd rather get the moves done early. But the bigger moves that I've mentioned, a couple guys already, Hannafin went to Vegas in a 3-way deal with Calgary and Philadelphia. So Vegas is already playing the LTIR game, and then they also pick up Noah Hannafin to bolster that forward lineup. Eichel's been a little bit banged up with injury. They started off hot, but as I'm sitting here now, let's pull up the NHL standings as we're talking about these trade deadline moves, because that's what we're really here to discuss. Looking at the playoff standings currently, Vegas has dropped themselves all the way down into a wild card position. So Hannafin is not only looking to be a stopgap, but he's looking to possibly help bring that team back into more of a prominent role in the playoffs. If the playoffs were to start today, they would not be playing the Avalanche. Vegas would be playing Dallas. Dallas, because Vancouver would be the number 1 overall seed in the West. So Vegas would be playing Dallas, and Vancouver, as of today, would be playing Nashville, who's fought their way back into a playoff spot. The Panthers, who have been having a lot of talk around them recently as the best team in the NHL, pick up Vladimir Tarasenko with, I believe, only giving up picks. Didn't actually have to give away a player. And if we're looking at Florida right now, they are on track to win the President's Trophy, 3 points ahead of Vancouver with 90. That's normally a curse, but this is a team in Florida that now has Stanley Cup experience. The best deal that they could have ever made in their franchise's history was rescuing Matthew Tkachuk from Calgary. getting him out of the Canadian market. He enjoys playing hockey again, and he is an absolute menace to have to play against. His playoff presence is going to be extreme in their success, and I can see Florida. I trust Florida more than I trust a lot of these other teams in the East. Boston still has to prove something to me because I've seen them give it away too many times. New York, now that they're in the number one spot, it's a little bit more legitimate, but I would still say I don't have a lot of faith in them. The Leafs brought in Ilya Lyubushkin, who is promptly knocked out by Rempe. We've started to see a little resurgence in the amount of fights happening in the NHL with Rempe now being an absolute menace to society. He did answer the bell for that hit on Ilya Lyubushkin, by the way, fought Ryan Reeves, even though you can tell he doesn't really know how to fight the NHL level. Blocked a lot of those big punches with his face. And then the Stars, this is what kind of kicked everything off, got Tanev from Calgary. So that's going to be a huge move for them. As of right now, they are 2 points ahead of both Winnipeg and Colorado. Let's see. The Avalanche do not play tonight. The Avs played last night and had a huge win, 7-2 over Detroit. The next time we will see Colorado in action will be tomorrow, and I assume this is when we're going to see all of those trade acquisitions, because none of the guys that we picked up are from an international squad, so we don't have to worry about visas or anything like that. We're finally going to see this new and improved burgundy and blue attack out on the ice. We're going to see the benefits or maybe lack thereof of what Chris McFarland and the Avalanche front office did at the trade deadline. A lot of great sports still going on. I know Niko was out this week. Like I said, I've bashed him in the face quite enough, so I kind of feel partially responsible. He did have to get his tonsils out today, so he's not out this week. He got him out earlier on this week, so he's out for this week, but he'll be back next, and he'll be able to respond to those comments made by Jordan. I know that he probably is happy that I get to talk a lot about the Bengals on our show because I normally don't get to do that, but I know he's going to have some response to those comments about Jokic. Like I mentioned, that's his king. We don't need to talk dirty about the king. Niko does not like that. But it was super awesome still to get Jordan on. Really happy that he was able to step in, and I appreciate him jumping in as a co-host. Be sure, I didn't mention it at the beginning of the show, but everyone should know by now. Follow, like the video, subscribe, follow along because we have some things in the works, a couple interviews with non-sports people, but they're going to be very interesting. If you like the intro song that you hear at the beginning and the end of the podcast, that is from a guy named Warren Garrett, who is currently a musician making his way in the country music world. I ran into him randomly at Losers at a bar at the MGM Grand in Las Vegas. Kind of talked to him a little bit, got his information, got in contact with him, and he made the song. We are going to get that interview finally scheduled, and that will be coming out here very shortly. And then there's something else going on behind the scenes that I'm still trying to get 100% nailed down. But there are a couple big things coming with the show. Plus, obviously, we're going to have the draft to talk about, March Madness with the NCAA wrestling tournament. Be sure to follow at Variety_Sports_ as well. We're super happy to be on the Variety Sports Network. Like I said, if we weren't there, Jordan would have never been able to come on the show tonight. And I really appreciate everybody tuning in. So if you were here for Jordan, hopefully you enjoyed the show. When Niko and I are around, we've been friends for a long time. So if you haven't ever heard a show with Niko and I, go back, check out last week's episode or some of the episodes we've done in the past. It's all on all podcasting platforms, and we are going to be released on Variety Sports Network's feed as well. So be sure to like, subscribe, follow. It helps. I know that it seems like it doesn't, but it does help quite a bit. Leave a like and a comment, interact with the video, and let us know what you think of our sports takes. But I think that's going to be it for me. Episode 173, solo. Obviously, we were featuring Jordan Maxon earlier. Of the far end of the bench for myself, Jimmy Pilato, my normal co-host, Niko Bryant, and a big special thank you to Jordan Maxon. We will see you guys next week.
If you don't stay down and you never quit, come on over here